Hey everybody! So before we get started, let's look at what we'll be building. So you'll see I've got a couple of squares here, and if I click on it, I can toggle the background styling, and I can also toggle the state value in here. It says true. So if I click here, they each are independently controlled and have their independent toggled state. So that's cool. Let's go ahead and build that. I'm gonna get rid of this, close down the server for that demo, because here's where I need to be. ls, make sure I know where I'm at, so cd into client, and I'm going to say open it all with code. So I had prepped this ahead of time. You can see I got rid of a lot of the boilerplate code that's in between app normally, and I got rid of some of the boilerplate code that's in the app.css, the style sheet for app as well. And I also am not using the logo, so I deleted that from the directory in here, and I'm no longer importing it. So as long as you have that set up, you're ready to get started with me. So to get things started, I'm going to give our app some properties here. So I'm going to say display, not of inline, but of type flex. I'm going to give it a height, I'm going to say a height property of 100 VH, which refers to the screen size that it's being looked on. I need to center it horizontally, so I'm going to say justify content center. I'm also going to want to align these vertically as well, so I'm going to say align items center. And then just the pattern that I want them to wrap by is going to be flex, flow, yeah, perfect. And then I want it to say row wrap. Great. And that kind of gets us started. So let's start building the state that's going to be inside our app. So I'm going to be using the React hooks. I'm going to say const, and this is a deconstructed array. I'm going to say app state, and then I'm going to say change state, which is going to be the name of the function I'm going to use anytime I need to modify this. So I'm going to say use state, and I'm going to need to import it in. So use state, and inside state, I'm going to be treating it as an object inside, and I'm going to give it an array of objects, and inside of that array of objects is going to be an object, right? That is going to be ID1, and then toggled set to false initially. All right, so it had, and see flat place right there? That's not going to work. So I need to say false. And let's go ahead and just copy this one so we can reuse it later on. So let's get on the other side of this because I'm adding an array just for the demo's sake. So let's go ahead and just add 4 just to match up with what we're aiming towards. And let's give them unique IDs. So 2, let's say 3, and let's say 4. Cool. And at this point, we're just using the React state hooks right here, which is a way of getting state in our functions. And we've got an object in here that has objects, that is an array of objects, that each of these are set to default as false. And we need to render these to the screen and give them a box associated with them, so something we can see and actually manipulate. And then when we click on them, we need to toggle this toggled from false to true. And so that's kind of getting ahead of ourselves. We shouldn't worry about the clicking event yet. We should just worry about getting these boxes on the screen. So for anything else, let's go ahead and just do that. I'm going to get into into our app. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let JSX know that I'm going to start using some JavaScript in here. And that's going to let me go ahead and access the app state, which is what I called this up here. So I'm accessing the state, which is where all of this information is. I'm going to say app state.objects, which is just saying app state.objects. So I'm accessing objects in here, so now I'm expecting to be inside an array. So now that I'm inside an array, I can use the map array prototype method. And I'm actually going to need to keep track of index. So map actually will let me do that. What I can do is add element in here, and the second bit is going to be index. And maybe I'm not going to use element, but if I need to access index, I need to have something here in that first. And so JSX is a little interesting. When I'm returning HTML elements, instead of like regular JavaScript, you would expect these brackets in here. That's not what it's going to want to see. It's going to want to see these parentheses. And so inside here, now I can start adding JSX, and it'll actually return the way I want it to do. So I'm going to have a div in here. Because it's something that's being rendered multiple times to the screen, I need to give it a unique key, and the key is going to be equal to the index. And I'm going to save that right here. There's a couple more properties I'm going to need. Ooh, let's not do that quite yet. I need to give it a class name equals, and let's say box, just to begin with, just because we want to get these boxes to the screen. We're going to need to use JavaScript to dynamically bring this in later on when we need to toggle it, but we'll worry about that a little bit later. And we can just kind of leave it at that. Let's go ahead and access box over, oops, not delete it, just copy box, get over to our style sheet on app.css, make sure it knows that you're talking to a class inside here. And by the way, our app.css, this works inside app.js because we're importing it. So if your CSS isn't working, check to make sure this path is proper. And the box, let's just give it the width of 200 pixels. Let's go ahead and get on a new line. Let's give it a height of 200 pixels as well. And let's give it a margin, just so they're not all squished together, a margin of 10 pixels, and then let's go ahead and save it. So there's our app state, and we're not using change state quite yet, but we'll need to use it anytime we modify something inside objects, or not modify something inside objects, but instead replace objects with the new value, which is what state needs us to do since it's immutable, they call that. Let's go ahead and run our server and just see where we're at currently. So npm start. Oh, so you'll notice how we don't have a background color here. We're probably going to need that if we want to actually end up seeing it. So let's go ahead and find a background color to play around with. Find a palette, so I'm going to say flat color palette. Alright. And this will be good enough. So let's grab this color here. And let's go ahead and give it a background color. So background color, and paste like so. Okay, so now that we have something to look at, let's go ahead and view what we have. Great. So we're getting close, and let's go ahead and put this on top of each other like so, and close this, just so I can kind of see what's happening here. Let's find another color. I'm going to copy this bit right here. And let's go ahead and replace this to see what we'll eventually want these to be modified to. Great. And keep in mind though that we want to be able to do these independently as well, and we'll be able to because they each have their own independent toggled value. So let's leave it purple for the moment, and let's close this down just to give us some more space. I would say typically if I was developing, I'd want to have like that window open, but just for the sake it kind of clutters stuff up. So let's go ahead and close out of everything, trim down the stuff, because that's what I want the box to be, but there's going to be an active class and then also an inactive class as well. Let's say .inactive, and what would I want inactive to be? Let's say inactive is going to have the background color of purple. All right, and inverse would be active. And now that we're doing that through a new class name, let's go ahead and get rid of this. And its background color is going to be that blue color. And let's see if I have that saved. Let's see. Maybe it's this one. Yes. Cool. And if you have Windows, that clipboard is open through your Windows key and then the V button, and I'm sure Mac has some sort of equivalent. All right, and because we have that, let's see like what the whole point of that was, is because now I can toggle just the background color by giving it a new class name in here. And this is important because this is going to end up being a function that's going to have to look at the toggled state and return either this string if it is active or the box inactive if not. So cool stuff to be had here. And in fact, let's go ahead and just kind of get into some of that functionality as well. So we need to just be underneath where you opened up this const state, because we're going to start building our first function that's going to manipulate this. We are going to create a function that is going to be called toggle active styles, and it's going to need an index in here. Okay, and let's open up that function using the brackets, and let's go ahead and say, because we have access to the index in here as well, so since we have that, let's say if app state dot objects, and we'll have the index available. So let's grab index and we'll just paste that in there, and when we use it we'll see how that works. We're going to say if appstate.objects.index.toggled is true, and I'm using this as like a shortcut. What I could do is say is true, like so, or I can just leave that out and just be lazy with it. And given the opportunity, I'll always take the lazy route. So I'm going to say if that is true, if the value is true, let's go ahead and return this box active. And I'm just going to return the string that says box active. Else, what I'm going to do is return, oops, let's grab the whole string, just again to be lazy. Box inactive. Cool. And let's save that. We don't even need to worry about state at all, because now we need to go ahead and put in the function saying toggle active styles. So I'm just going to copy this to make sure I don't even make a typo, and I'm going to add index right here. So let's go ahead and just move this over here, and we actually don't, sure. Let's leave the styles as well. Wait, are you going to let me do that? Nope. Because I'm going to open up my server. I'm going to say npm start. Oh, you know what? You see how I'm using these parentheses right here? That's not going to work. That needs to be an array item. All right, so when I save this, this should work again. Great. And let's go ahead and change, let's change this value to true and save it. And see how this changes to a blue value right here, or this changes blue? It's because it's reading the value, if it's toggled or not, and returning this class based on this. So let's change this to false back, and let's make sure each of these can be independently manipulated. Awesome. So let's go ahead and change this back to false, because that's not entirely what we're trying to do. What we want to do is make it to where it's controlled by an on click, right? And also in the demo, we had kind of like an animation that went with it. It wasn't so quick and snappy. So let's close this down and worry about that transition, because that's probably going to be the easiest one to get out the way. Whenever it changes from this inactive to active state, what I want to do is say transition. I'm going to say for everything, for all. What I should do is just say background color, actually. So let's say background color, since that's the only thing that's really changing or needs to be manipulated at all. Let's say 0.1 seconds. And then ease in and then back out again. Oh, and I'm not sure why that happens. Awesome. Cool. So now that, and that pretty much finishes off our style sheets. So let's get back into app.js and get into the toggle active state, because that one's going to be a good one. And we'll need to use the change state here, since this is the only function that's ever able to overwrite what's going on in here. So I'm going to call this function toggle active. And it's also going to need to take the index, because it's going to need to know which one it's actually going to be playing around with, which one it's going to be manipulating. And I'm going to open up this function in here, which means open up the brackets. Now, I need to make a copy of the array here, which is objects, in a way that I can actually transform it and manipulate it separately from the array itself. And so I'm going to say let array copy equal this array that is deconstructed app state dot objects. Objects, cool. And make sure that there is 3 of these dots in there. And now that we can play around with this, let's say array copy index dot toggled. And we need to check to see if this is true. So what I could do is say that is true. But what I'm going to do is just leave it like this as a shortcut, so I can get on a new line and start up this ternary operator, use this question mark, which says if this is a true value, what I need to do is say array copy index dot toggled. I need to, not toggled, and let's make sure that, and what I need to do is set that to false, because if that's true, it needs to be set to false, and vice versa, if it's false, it needs to be set to true. And so to do that last little bit here, we need to add the little else operator in here for our ternary. So if it's not true, if it's true, run this command. If it's not true, run this bit right here. And let's go ahead and just copy this. And before, let's go ahead and fix this, because I called it toggled. So let's just copy, paste, make sure there's no typos, because that's important. It's important not to throw ourselves off. We're already doing some complicated stuff. Let's make sure not to overcomplicate it for ourselves. And we need to set it to true. Okay, and when I save it, this looks like it's good, but there's one more step we need to do, which is we need to use this change state and actually modify this. So what I'm going to do is get right underneath the array copy where we set up this ternary bit, and I'm going to say change state inside here, and change state is going to need to take an object, and for good measure what I'm going to do is app state, and I'm going to tell you why that's good measure. It's actually not quite necessary, but let's get into that a little bit later. I'm going to say objects dot array copy. So I'm completely overriding objects with this array copy, which is what we this is the actual one that we're toggling, and so we're overriding it with array copy. So this is nice. Let's go ahead and, oh yes, why is that a little interesting? I put that in for good measure. It's not entirely necessary, because when it would be necessary is if I added something else in here like text, and I said this is text. And let's make sure to add a comma here. Now, if I left it like this and I didn't deconstruct it, what it's going to do is it'll overwrite this text, this is text, and just overwrite it with this objects in here. So after I change state, I wouldn't have this extra value in here. I would just have the objects. So what you would do to get around it is you spread app state, and then it'll copy over this text with this value in here, and then modify, and then overwrite only objects in here with this array copy. And so that's why I just say for good measure, it future-proofs it if I just spread it ahead of time. There's one more step that you're all probably waiting for, is which I need to add an onClick event listener in here, and I'm going to say onClick, and it needs to run a function that is this toggle active with index. And did I shut down the server? Yes, I did. So let's clear this out and say npm start Give it some time. So it's saying app state is not defined, and I can kind of see what the problem is. I can see this S isn't capitalized. So let's try to find out where that is. And it looks like it's right here. And actually that wasn't such a hard guess because it says what line over here. Oh, and my theme makes it really hard to see. But let's go ahead and change this to a capital S. Oh, capital S, there we go. Let's save it. All right, so now that we have our app going, when I click it, I can toggle the state of these items. Yeah, React is fun. I hope this was informative.